Hi, welcome back to Life with Gert. We are working on Crabapple Hill's embroidery needle case today. And what I'm going to do is show you how to do the basic stem stitch. If I open this up, you'll see that I have started working on mine. And here you can see where I have started the stem stitch. The stem stitch is used a lot in embroidery. And what I believe is really the most important is that you learn how to make the stitch consistent. So what I've done, let me fold this up and put this aside, is I've taken a piece of muslin and I've made a template for myself to practice the stitches. What I did was took one of my creative grids and set it on a piece of muslin. And then I took a Sharpie permanent marker and I just put a dot every 1/4 of an inch. And then I took and put a dot every 1/8 of an inch. Then once I had done that, what I did was actually to do out the stem stitch. And the reason why I did this is because I really wanted to practice and see how close I needed this stem stitch to be. So here you can see it in a 1/4 of an inch, and quite honestly that's too big of a stitch. And then you can see here I've done it in an 1/8 of an inch, and that to me looks better. What I've also done is, once I had done that, I took and just drew a slight curve on another piece of muslin, because what I wanted to see was how the stem stitch held up against curves. And at an 1/8 of an inch, I think this is pretty good for what it is that I want to do. So, for demonstration purposes, I'm using 8 pearl cotton. It's a little bit thicker, and I thought it would be easier for you to see on tape. But on my actual project, I'm using just plain floss. I used 2 out of the 6 strands. So that's what we'll be doing. So I'm going to take my needle that I have all threaded, and I'm going to show you how I do my stem stitch. I always hold the fabric in front of me and I stitch from left to right with a stem stitch. So what I'm going to do is as I said, working from left to right. I'm going to take in a little ways back, I'm just going to go down in the fabric, in the muslin, and I'm going to bring the needle up in my very first dot. I'm going to pull my needle through, smoothing this out, and you'll notice that I'm not pulling the tail all the way through. I'm going to bring my trailing thread down. I'm going to go into the next dot that I've made, and then I'm going to turn my fabric over. And what I'm looking for is to make certain that my needle is below the thread. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to turn my needle, and I'm just going to carry it down, and what I want it to do is come up about halfway in between the dot that I came up in and the dot that I went down in. I'm going to turn my fabric over again, and what I'm looking for is to make certain that my embroidery floss is caught underneath the needle. And in this case it's not totally, so I'm going to take this out again. I'm going to pull my tail a little bit, and then I'm going to go back down in between again. Oops, here we go. And I'm going to bring the needle up again about halfway in between, and that time it's a little bit better. I'm going to pull it through. When I pull it through, I'm pulling the thread up gently, and then I'm bringing it back down. When you do your stem stitch, you always start with your thread down. So I'm going to put my needle in again. I'm going to tug that a little bit because I can feel it coming up in the back. And I'm going to bring my needle down and go back in that same hole again. The reason why I'm doing this is because I'm really trying to anchor my tail. One of the things in embroidery that I can remember from when I was a little girl, they always used to tell us that the back of your work should look just as neat as the front of the work. And one of the other things is you don't want to ever carry your threads from one place to another, because carrying threads, they can show up later on. They can show through your piece. So let's say I was working here and I needed to do something else down here. If I was to carry my thread, and I'll do it for you, you can I can. You can see that carried thread in the background, and you really don't want that. So I'm going to pull my thread back now. You can see the back of my piece. While it's not as nice as the front of my piece, it still looks pretty good. So I'm going to now pull my tail through, and then I could just keep right on going. That's how you do a stem stitch. So, if everybody could get their projects back out again and get working on their stem stitches, when I come back, I will be ready to show you our next stitch. Take care, and thanks for stopping by.